So thank you for coming along. My name is Linda Kelly. I come from Melbourne, and I want to acknowledge that I'm here on Aboriginal land and pay my regards and respects to elders past and present. Today we're actually trying to do something a little bit different. We thought we'd first challenge ourselves by making sure that we had the most number of presenters online of any of the presentations, just to see if we can really challenge the technical ability of the people here. And we also thought we'd challenge a little bit by presenting some dilemmas to you and asking you for some of the answers. We don't have the answers to these questions. And so we thought we'd reverse the role a little bit instead of pretending that we know everything. What we want to do today is explore a little bit about this intersection between research and complex change. So myself and Shashara, who's here with me in the room, and our three presenters online, who will introduce themselves very shortly, have all been involved in different projects that are loosely termed governance projects or programs. And we've used governance in the broadest sense of the word, programs that are working with the formal and the informal institutions and people who make decisions, who allocate resources, who decide how things are done in countries and regions of the world. And in those different programs and projects, we've come across some very, very different practice. So we've picked 4 examples that are really, really different, come from different parts of the world, have different characteristics, are working with different groups. But we've come across some common things too. One is that it seems to take a long time. And one of the interesting things about these 4 programs, they're all supported by the Australian government, they all receive funding from DFAT, is that they've been supported over a long time to do things. And that's made a big difference. The other interesting thing about these programs, and perhaps not surprisingly, is that they've all changed quite a lot. They've adapted, they've changed, they've responded to context. Good things have happened, bad things have happened that have shaped these programs. And I guess the third thing that's common about them is they've all struggled in different ways to communicate what they're about. Both in terms of the value, so telling donors and other supporters what they're doing, but also just having the information at the right time and the right place for the work that they're doing. And each of them in different ways have used this notion of research to help with that. And I guess one of the dilemmas that we want to pose to you later is, this traditional M&E stuff, the stuff that I've made my living out of for the past 30 years, let me say, maybe it doesn't have much use in these sort of complex systems programs. Maybe we do have to think about research approaches, different ways of understanding, different ways of communicating, different ways of inquiring to support this sort of complex change. So that's part of, or one of the questions we'd like to pose to you and get you to think about. The way we're going to do this is our 4 presenters, so our 3 presenters online, together with Tashara, who's here, are going to tell you a little bit about these programs and some aspects of it. They're also complex, you're not going to hear the whole story. They're going to hear a very brief bit of it, and I'm going to keep them on time so that we have some time for discussion. And then we're going to stop and give you a chance to ask questions and get some more detail. We've invited our DFAT colleagues to be here because they might want to say something too, given they've supported the programs. And then we've got some questions for you. So as I say, we'd like to turn it around a little bit and turn it into a bit of a discussion group. So that's the plan for today. Technology willing, we'll have a really interesting discussion. So let me hand first to my colleague Lisa Buggy, who's based in the Pacific. We're going to move the slides along. So first fail is me, not moving the slides. And Lisa's going to talk to you a little bit about the Governance for Resilience program that operates in the Pacific. Lisa, can you hear me?
I can, Linda. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, good morning, colleagues. My name's Lisa Buggy. As Linda mentioned, I'm with the Governance for Resilient Development Governance for Resilient Development in the Pacific project, UNDP implemented project, and I'm based here in the Pacific office in Suva. I think one of the most complex things about presenting and communicating on a complex governance program is being given 7 minutes to do so. So just outlining very briefly the project itself. So if we could go to the next slide, please. The GovFres project has been operating in across 3 distinct forms for about greater than 10 years. We operate currently with 6 Pacific countries and working very specifically with government. And we have 5 donor partners, and Australia has been a consistent donor partner across the 10 plus years of our programming, and has, I guess, enabled us to design and redesign a couple of times within that span, which has enabled the project to really adapt to what it is today. We come at governance from a very specific lens, which is really about the inclusion and incorporation of climate change and disaster risk into governance. So we work within a very specific space. However, we do that across a kind of 2 main outcome areas of the project: the systems work itself, the systems strengthening work, and a second component specifically around behaviour change and the use of learning and influencing and advocating to support that technical systems change. And I think the biggest part of the program in its current form is that we're really focused around our Pacific country partners actually designing and leading that governance strengthening for themselves. So as a result, the project actually looks quite different in the 6 countries that we're working in. As Linda's suggested, we don't have time to go into the details of that today. But I guess the main thing to take away at this point in time is that it's a project that really works with central government agencies, particularly planning and financing, as well as at a sectoral level and a subnational level, looking at ways to strengthen resilient development within governance systems in the Pacific. Next slide, please. So I guess to talk to Linda's point at the start, and I guess the main reason behind the session is that the GovFres program has really changed quite significantly over time. So we did start very specifically with a pilot program, which was very technical focused, and at the time was solely DFAT funded. And then we were able to design the next phase of that, which became GovFres. And we also had the luxury, I guess, and the privilege of undertaking a midterm evaluation and therefore a redesign off the back of that in 2023-24. So we're now programming essentially GovFres phase 2. And the redesign process has really allowed us to, I think, do our own internal research and analysis and consultation to really shift the project to, I guess, become a lot more focused in particular areas. And so you'll see I've mentioned kind of some of the bigger shifts in the program from GovFres phase 1 to GovFres phase 2. I'll just point out a couple of these. There's been a big shift in our own conceptual framing of what the GovFres project is about. So in phase 1, we really talked about it as kind of a project that was about technical inputs for resilience. We've only more recently grounded our work in this, the fact that we are actually a governance-focused program, and that governance being focused on that resilient development aspect, as I mentioned. I think the other big shift for us has been about our in-country work and learning over time from what we've been doing that actually, because the project needs to do very different things in very different places because of the diversity of the Pacific, because where different governments are in terms of the governance system, because of different traditional and social norms that we're operating within in each country. Our country work needs to be really country-specific, design and led. And so we've really gone from being what we termed a regional project to a project that now has very dedicated country programs that are kind of localized and contextualized based on the needs of each country and based on what our Pacific country partners are saying about their understanding and their requirements for their own Pacific resilient development. The last one I want to mention, and this is, I guess, my final point as well, and something Linda has touched on, is that we really have found that our monitoring and evaluation systems has evolved over time, but has really needed to evolve in this third phase, or GovForES phase 2, to be able to help us communicate more appropriately about the program. So we've really moved to something that was quite simple and I guess very traditional, into something that's a lot more exploratory and complex in a lot of ways, but also really about that aspect of evaluation and assessment and understanding the value of the program in whose mind and what that looks like to help us really communicate the work of the program. So with that, I'll move to the last slide. So as I mentioned there, and as Linda has mentioned as well, we have had a lot of difficulty in terms of communicating about the program, particularly about the complexity of the program. But as I mentioned, our original monitoring evaluation framework, particularly for GovForES phase 1, wasn't really capturing effectively the results that we were achieving. It was capturing information about the project, but that information wasn't really telling the story of A, the governance reform that was happening, B, incremental changes over time, which are often hard to capture in a way where it's a report based on a year's worth of work. As we know, governance change happens incrementally, and it's a progress. It builds and builds over time. So that was really hard to kind of capture in numbers or very specific time-bound kind of measurements. We've also had a lot of difficulty explaining why our program has adapted and changed so much. And that's really because it's been, particularly now, it's been country-driven and country-led. So we're being really responsive to what our country partners are saying about, I guess, the current political economy, the current champions within this space, where there's current interest. And that means that pieces of work shift and change all the time. And we respond to that in terms of how we're working with the country. That's often very hard to kind of identify why that's happening, particularly in standard traditional monitoring and evaluation systems. And without that kind of underlying reasoning from the outside, the program can often look like it's doing a whole lot of random things that might not be connected, or there might not be reasoning for why that's happening. So I guess just a final point, that what that has meant for us is that we've now really adopted a much more complex MEL system that is based on a number of tiers, where we're still providing the information that is needed in terms of results frameworks for donors and for the organisation that we work within, that actually is much more focused now in terms of the value of the program and what we're doing for the country itself, and trying to tell that story, as well as kind of measure the longer term change over time through country outcome mapping, as well as utilising action research and components of learning to really build a bigger story around the governance change. The challenge with that is that we're still up against working within a system that is very much still about specific compliance reporting, specific measurement systems that are very short-term based, and being able to justify why we would do things like regular learning sessions or resourcing for a much bigger MEL team or reporting and that's based around dialogue rather than very specific templates. So still challenges, but I guess that's one way the project has evolved over time.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'll stop there and back over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. So we're going straight, I think, to Nepal. Vishnu, would you like to introduce yourself and your program?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Can hear you very well, yes, and we can see you. You've got an audience of about 50 people, maybe, all waiting on your words.
Great to be sharing some of our emerging lessons and challenges from Nepal. I'm Vishnu Adhikari, Governance Director with the Asia Foundation Office in Nepal. In this capacity, I provide overall leadership, strategic direction, and the management support to this subnational governance program that is a 10-year partnership with the Australian government. Can we move to the next slide, please? The overarching purpose or the goal of this program is to enable the subnational government to be more effective, accountable, and responsive in the context that the country moved from a two-century unitary system to a federal system. And in order to attain that goal, the program has been contributing to 5 different sets of outcome or the result that is trying to contribute to in order to achieve that goal by providing support, technical coaching, and facilitating support to improve the intergovernmental relations, as well as support in developing appropriate policies, programs, and reforms at the subnational level in health, economic, climate areas, as well as in gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. So as Linda outlined at the beginning, it's a complex program trying to address emerging opportunities and need as the country navigate through this complex transition to a new federal governance system. So in this couple of minutes, I'm not going to try to explain the program. I'll just try to focus on what are some of the tools and approaches that the program has been trying to adopt to keep track of the context and where the program is making contribution, and in terms of what the changes or results that this program is about to attain and how successful we are in communicating those changes. Can we move to the next slide, please? So in this slide, I just would like to seek your attention to the timeline from 2015 to 25 where we are, as this program has moved from first phase to a short bridging phase to the current phase and will go until 2027. So it's a 10-year program. And you could see above the timeline the massive context change since the first launch of this program, including 2 election cycles, the COVID distraction, and the current context under which we are in a quite different context given the shift in the ODA situation. And the events below the line that we've tried to note is how program over the time has made necessary adjustment and broad shift to the changing need, changing priorities, and remain relevant to the country, to the stakeholder, while still trying to attain the same goal that it has since the first phase. So what has been some of the approaches that we try to keep track of what we contribute and what shift and changes that we have been seeing? Can we move to the last slide? Next slide, please. So the program adopting a very flexible and adaptive monitoring, evaluation, and learning system employed varieties of approaches, such as periodic pause and reflection, which is having time to review the context and where the program has been contributing or whether the intended contribution support is relevant or not, as well as looking forward using the scenario planning tool to scan the future. Can we predict the next 3 to 6 months, not the long term, and what train and what shift that we anticipate and how we bring those changes, as well as using the standard require donor require external evaluation, looking at the data report contribution and what the broader achievements or the contribution that the program is making, as well as very focused thematic assessment of particular area of support. For example, the program for a significant of time contributed to the local government to promote access to justice through alternative mediation. So likewise, it is contributing lately to citizen engagement at the subnational level in their planning and budgeting process to make it more participatory and accountable. So honing attention to the specific area and doing those targeted assessment, as well as using the relevant external actors and institutions to do broader context analysis and research, such as public opinion poll, the stakeholder opinion poll, or academic review of the overall context. I mean, these are some of the tools and approaches that the program has been trying to capture the change or the contribution that the program has been making. However, our success in communicating what the program is doing and what changes it is bringing, it's still a mix in terms of the successes. Where we feel slightly successful is communicating small change of stories based on the research evidence and equip the local actors and the institutions and the champion to communicate what they feel, the change that they feel good about, not the larger picture of the program. So in that respect, we feel some progress, some achievements. However, when it comes to communicating to the larger national audience or the international audience, even though we get very positive evaluation from standard external evaluation in terms of the relevance, effectiveness, however, the change or the shift in the institution or policy system are so unstable that over the period, those shift and change that we feel are relevant within a period of time or as the context change, they become irrelevant. So it's very difficult to say, like 5 years back, the program contributed to make the local government more accountable, more responsive because of the change of leadership. That is maybe in this context, in few of the partners municipalities, it is irrelevant. The other key constraint that we constantly have, even communicating our donor at headquarters, is we have this bucket of small successes in different places, but what this add up to? So for instance, in 10 years, with 10 years of partnership in this governance sector, what is the larger narrative? What is the legacy of this Australia Asia Foundation contribution in shifting the governance change in Nepal. So we have this challenge of adding up to a larger story of change. And finally, how do we attribute our contribution to this shift? So, for example, if we have some again successes in one sector or one part of the governance system, and where our contribution could have been very minimal, even though very critical and very opportunistic, that would have been contributed as catalyst, but to what proportion we communicate as our success and our contribution. So these are some of the broad challenges and learnings that this program has been able to observe. And yeah, I'm very happy to share these few points at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishno. And our last speaker online, Petra from Indonesia. Would you like to come in and introduce yourself?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay. Well, thank you. First, I'm Petra. I have the privilege of being the team leader of SCALA, which stands for Synergies and Collaboration to Accelerate Basic Service Delivery, and it's a DFAT funded program. And firstly, I just want to say that from the SCALA perspective, we consider ourselves as a governance program because we focus on the processes and systems underlying service delivery within government. So if you could look at the next slide. SCALA is a new program. We started at the end of 2022 and really started activities in 2023, but it's actually an extension of a long line of programs since the 2000s in Indonesia, from Access, Logica, and Antara through to various programs, AIPD, and then Compact, and now SCALA. One thing as a locally employed team leader, huge appreciation for DFAT's consistency in supporting Indonesia's decentralization process. If you look on the column on the left side, basically SCALA works in 10 provinces across Indonesia, and we're plotted to be an 8-year program. We're now entering into the last 1.5 years of phase 1, and hopefully we'll be able to show through our M&E that we have resulted in sufficient results to justify an extension into the second phase through to 2030. And the official goal of the program is to address poverty and disparity by improving basic service delivery to vulnerable communities in Indonesia's underdeveloped regions. Basically, we work with 3 sets of stakeholders. Firstly, at the national level, and one of our end of program outcomes there is that we try to ensure a stronger enabling environment for the delivery of subnational services. Then we work also with a set of the local governments that are in the 10 provinces where we're working, and how to make sure that help them to better improve their service delivery. And then we also work based on our 30 end of program outcome to build greater participation and representation of vulnerable communities, particularly of women, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable groups. And as you can see in our geographic coverage, which also extends quite a way through across Indonesia, there's around 25 million people that are impacted by this work. So looking at the next slide, how we conceptualize our work is that, and why it extends across quite a long period, is that we're actually working, trying to impact dominant systems by emergent systems, innovations, reforms, changes in existing systems that will enable better processes. And I think from the initial programming, where we're doing a lot of experimenting, you can see that a lot of our impact was basically methodological impact, new approaches, new ideas, but not quite into impacting on dominant systems. And so a lot of our focus at the moment is around ecosystemic impact and operational impact, how the arrangement between organizations, institutions, and then how it changes actual day-to-day behavior. So in the next slide, what we can see here is that if you're looking at across an annual process of service delivery, you can actually break down what are the components of that process or that cycle. And here we look at which are the different directorates that are engaged and involved on each of the different cycles. And so this also emphasizes where M&E research and analytics are essentially critically important in the initial stage of the cycle to make sure the overall cycle is effective, particularly around data collection, consolidation, and ensuring that the data is sufficiently disaggregated to represent the needs and the demands of vulnerable communities. So just in my last slide, I wanted to emphasize various lessons that we've learned, but particularly in line with the theme of this session, maybe just focus on the first 2 points. The first is that it's critically important that data sets and systems used by government really adequately present and represent conditions and needs of vulnerable groups. And where we're transitioning from a centralized system to a decentralized system, a lot of the data sets and processes before were essentially established to support macro level centralized decision making. But where we're trying to with the focus on GEDSI, how do we make sure that the data that now is being used by government really represents and is sufficiently disaggregated to be able to see and understand and map the needs of vulnerable communities. The second point I wanted to make is that the space for consultations and advocacy really needs to be complemented by roles for government data and information to be examined and validated by representatives of vulnerable groups. So where no matter how much advocacy vulnerable groups make, but if it's not supported by the data and information, official data and information used within government systems, it's very hard for the needs and the demands to be incorporated into government planning. And that's where a focus on the data and the analytics, the research on this is then critically important. So I'll stop there, but thank you so much for this opportunity to talk a bit about our program.
Thanks, Petra, and thank you, everybody. My name's Tashara Dibley, and I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Human Security and Social Change at La Trobe University. So unlike our previous 3 speakers, I'm not actually implementing the program that I'm going to talk to you about today. I've been involved in an evaluation of the Nabalan program in East Timor, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about what that process of doing an evaluation of a program that has extended over a number of years, what we're learning from that. So Nabalan is a program that's focused on ending violence against women and children in Timor-Leste. It was established in 2014. It's still running. It's in its 3rd phase, which is set to finish up in 2026, but with the possibility of continuing into a 4th phase into 2030. The program is funded by DFAT and implemented by the Asia Foundation. The phase 3 goal of the program is that women and children in Timor-Leste enjoy gender equality and live free from violence. So the way that we've approached this evaluation, like a couple of the other projects, in particular the project in Nepal, what we were trying to do is try and understand the contribution of this program to changing the system around ending violence against women and children in Timor-Leste. One of the tools that we had in hand when undertaking this evaluation is some knowledge about what you need to develop strong policies around ending violence against women and children. And there is substantial evidence that shows that countries that have strong strong and autonomous feminist movements, that there's a correlation between those and having policies in place that are designed to end violence against women and children. So what we wanted to understand is what role, excuse me, what role has Nabalan played in kind of contributing to strengthening that feminist movement. So those were the governance aspects of the program that we were looking at. So I guess gender-based violence is not typically looked at as a governance program. So we had to be, I guess, a little bit creative in our thinking around what elements of governance we were looking at. So specifically, we were looking at the way the program's contributing to strengthening the feminist movement, what role it's played in strengthening the CSOs providing service deliveries to survivors, and where the program has made space for civil society and government to come together. So I guess in line with the focus of our discussion today, I was sort of interested in understanding how being able to work over an extended period of time has helped Nabalan make any contribution to this systems change. So I'd say the short answer is, and in line with what Linda said at the beginning, this long time frame has allowed the program to adapt and evolve, to respond to the context and kind of work to its strengths. What we've seen over the last, maybe it's worth just mentioning that the evidence base for this is a series of reports. I'll talk a little bit more about them a bit later, and a few interviews. And we can talk in the discussion about sort of the choices around those as the sources of evidence. But what from that evidence base, the changes that we've been able to see are that over this period of time, the program has helped this system become more robust. So this system to end violence against women and children. There's been some professionalization through the introduction of a Certificate 3 for people working in the sector. And then some specific sort of strengthening of referral pathways for women who've experienced violence. But in doing that, in strengthening the sector and making it a bit more robust, there's also been this opportunity to shift from service delivery to building a movement. So embedded in some of the service strengthening activities have been these opportunities to embed ideas about feminism. Many of those ideas which didn't really have strong roots in Timor prior to the program, and getting those ideas out into the community, into places which maybe wouldn't traditionally fit within the typical organizations that you would consider as feminist organizations. The program's also created space for younger feminists and also for a sort of an intersectionality of the movement, so people with disability and LGBTQ as well. But so despite these changes, the other thing that we've found is that the program has pushed up against some real limitations. So namely the patriarchal system in Timor-Leste is quite deeply embedded, and its influence over politics has kind of put in some limits into what the program's been able to achieve. And then also, I guess, there is this tension around the ability of an aid-funded program to actually build a movement. And a lot of the feedback, critical feedback on the program is not around the choices that the program has made so much as the fact that the system within which the program is being delivered is limited in what it can actually deliver. So then, thinking about the way this story has been told, and what limits there have been around, I guess, using traditional reporting and monitoring and evaluation systems to tell this long story of change. Again, just in a nutshell, the short answer is, while the program has a really comprehensive set of regular and detailed reports, there's sort of a limit to how much these reports on their own can tell us about that long-term shift and change that's happened over the last 10 years. So we've looked at progress reports, annual reports, design documents, and a number of evaluations, and you can imagine there's quite a few of them over a period of 10 years. As a sort of external researcher, I've had that privilege of being able to come in and sort of look at them and think about what story they're telling over an extended period of time. But that takes time and resources and a dedicated focus to do that. And one of the things that's emerged through this more detailed analysis of the report are that there are some structural challenges in using these types of reports to tell some of the change stories, or in particular, the barriers to change. So I think keeping in mind that a lot of these reports are public-facing documents, program staff need to be careful about what they write, in particular around political issues in the context of Timor, but then also internal organizational political issues that may be getting in the way of some of the delivery of their programs. And so just relying on these reports to tell the stories of change, but also to identify where the obstacles are and what might be needed to overcome them are limited. So yeah, on that sort of what we've been able to do is to try and fill some of those gaps through some targeted interviews with people who are part of the movement, observers of the movement, to try and paint a fuller picture. That's all I want to share with you for now, and I'll hand over back to Linda.
So that's a romp through 4 very different programs, as we said, all working in different ways around this very broad area of governance and all facing different challenges around communicating and making sense. We thought we'd just give you a few minutes to see if people had questions, either online or from the audience. And then, as I said, we've got some questions for you. Any questions for our speakers? Yep, so you're able to use the chat, particularly for those people who are online. Yeah, I think we need to give you a microphone so everyone can hear you. Yeah.
Hi, thanks to the panel. My name's Cam from the Development Policy Centre. I guess I had a question about the design of these programs and whether these issues were kind of foreseen in design, because it seems to me that we obviously come up against these problems quite routinely, but we keep writing designs that promise or overpromise what changes can be achieved. So I'm just wondering, like, in all or some of the programs, the extent to which these things were kind of foreseen, because from my perspective, they're pretty foreseeable.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Who would like to take this? Maybe Bishop?
Thank you. That's a really excellent question. Yes, to some extent, we foresaw those problems. And for that reason, for instance, when this program was launched in 2017, for about a year, the design itself, the program decided that it's not worth of actually structuring a monitoring evaluation framework because of the flux of change and under which the program was trying to see where it is going to be relevant and how it is going to be implemented. Likewise, after the COVID, this program, we have made significant revision and adjustment to our MAL framework, including revision to the outcome for 3 times. The reason that being is what the metaphor that we use is this program is like Chinese acupuncture. So the program tries to nail down where the problems are or where the opportunities are. So it keeps on chasing the targets, however, maintaining the overall same direction. And for that reason, we knew it's not going to be a traditional data or the trend that we could track, and that would tell a change of this story. So we had experienced time and again, and this is what I was earlier trying to briefly mention, is the standard monitoring system with the targets, with the indicators, are able to only capture marginal part of the program. And for that reason, we have tested, for example, outcome harvesting, just looking at staying away from the program and just talking to the beneficiaries, talking to the external people. And likewise, on the larger context, for example, very recently, the program is partnering with Latrop to um, take a stock of the last 10 years of political governance shift in Nepal. Is there any progress? Because our data says that there has been progress towards more consolidated, stable federalism, and therefore the subnational government becoming stable and predictable. However, the larger narrative is very different. The larger narrative, when we look at the public opinion, etc., it's a mixed picture. So we wanted to take a, a step away from the program to look at the context, what changes that have been experienced in the 1 decade, and whether the program has made any relevant contribution or not. So to answer your question, yes, we foresaw that the challenge in the design.
Did anyone else online want to add anything, Petra?
Can I respond also? I think there's a yes or no to that question, that it's predictable. I think the if only reading MEL reports from previous programs and incorporating that into the design is definitely insufficient, right? But also where you're considering that the design process happens 1 to 2 years prior to the actual implementation, there's a lot of changes that happens within that period that good luck in trying to predict. For instance, Papua, 2 provinces suddenly becoming 6 provinces, that was unpredictable. And so actually incorporating in the design sufficient flexibility that will allow for the fact that there will be aspects that we cannot predict. So there, a lot of that is in also the designing of the risk matrix, which DFAT has a very robust risk matrix format that we have to follow in predicting what are likely changes, what are possible influences towards the program, and taking into consideration at that time the fact that there would be national elections, local elections, changes in policies, changes in priorities that needs to be incorporated as we progress. So to the extent possible, there are aspects that we can look at ensuring are in the design, but there's also a lot of unknowns that continue to happen on it almost sometimes on a day-by-day basis. So, but thanks for the question.
Any other questions from the audience over here? Maybe we might just have to move the microphone around so that people online can hear you.
Hi, this is Tamara from the Institute for Sustainable Futures. I have a question that could be to all of you, but perhaps Lisa first, because you mentioned that you were doing results-based monitoring, but then you also added outcome mapping, looking at governance changes over time, which is also very sort of detailed and elaborate kind of evaluation system. And perhaps there was a bit of pushback about the number of resources that you needed and a big evaluation team to do this level of accurate kind of reporting. So yeah, how do you sort of thread the needle in finding that balance between doing valuable MEL, but also not it being so burdensome that it takes up a large proportion of your budget that's meant for implementation?
Just an easy question. Thank you so much for that. I think, I mean, yes, that balance between implementation and the, I guess, the learning and the measuring and the, communicating of that information is a fine one. However, I guess in terms of our design for phase 2, we were very aware of that. And I guess a lot of our analysis on our first phase was really about the fact that this work is very much people work. So there is components that is obviously technical, and you provide technical, I guess, specialization on certain things. But technical systems change can't actually happen without people, I guess, believing in it and championing it and wanting it to happen. So as a result of that, our design incorporated an outcome that was essentially about people and learning and influencing and advocating. So we, I guess, jinxed the system a little bit by essentially saying that part of our implementation is that. And so that enables us to be a lot more intentional about incorporating learning processes, learning, peer-to-peer learning across our country partners, learning processes within the team, intentional comms. It's not just about, I guess, putting out visibility in a narrative, but is actually about influencing change and sharing information about how that change has happened, and that kind of action research component as well. So I guess that's how we have done it. And I guess in terms of bringing people along for that ride, that design process that we went through was about a year. And as I mentioned, we have 5 donor partners. So we set up essentially a donor management coordination group that we ensured that our donors were part of that process as we went, and were aware of kind of the direction that we were going in and could input at certain points in time. So I guess we didn't kind of a year after our midterm evaluation surprise them all with, oh, look, we're actually going to do a whole piece around learning and influencing and advocating. So they were brought along on that journey. So and part of the work that we did in the consultations and the research and analysis to come to that kind of conclusion. I hope that helps. I'll leave it there.
We might just keep moving. There's a few more questions in the room. So perhaps over here. Back, yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentations, all really insightful. A lot of the challenges that my name's Katrina from Clear Horizon. A lot of the challenges that you're speaking to around monitoring and learning really resonate with me on a lot of the programs I work on. And I'm really interested to see how you have gone navigating those whilst meeting kind of funder requirements. So just your reflections on kind of building slightly different M&E systems or different ways of doing things, and what that takes in terms of kind of convincing others, I guess.
Petra, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, and it sort of relates also to the previous question that bearing in mind that it's not that the program is delivering the whole service delivery process, for instance, for Scala, but that we're actually leveraging off of local government funding and resources that are actually much larger. So investing in M&E and investing in lessons learned, actually, the influencing agenda of our work has been recognized as being underinvested in the past, and so really being able to justify now that the cross-learning, investing in documenting and creating video stories, etc., as well as on the overall M&E, becomes is actually much more justified, because it's not just about the program itself, but it's about leveraging and influencing the overall stakeholders. And if you don't have the information and the processes to influence, you don't have enough people pushing in the same direction to force those changes into dominant systems. So that's from our perspective. We've actually tried to invest more in that side of our work. Thank you.
Okay, I might just see if Patrick has a question over here.
Hi, Patrick Kilby, and happily retired. My question, also editor-in-chief of the Development in Practice, I should put a plug in. My question is something which I'm working on at the moment, and that is the opportunity or threat that artificial intelligence systems give to people like ourselves, because I still do a bit of monitoring and more evaluation sort of stuff. So it's an interesting area, and anybody who knows me know where I'd come down on that. It's probably more of a threat, but it's interesting because there's not much we can do to stop it. But how can we either shape it or just fight back the tide or something, or embrace it, sort of?
So you know that ChatGPT writes brilliant executive summaries, don't you? That DFAT love, but I'll tell you about that later. Okay, who'd like to tackle that? Lisa, I know UNDP, where you work, has a really strong commitment to AI and its ability to solve problems. Do you have any views on how it might assist your work?
Okay, in its current form, I think what ChatGPT or Copilot or any of those, I guess, tools can really be useful in an organisation like UNDP is taking the resourcing out of some very administrative and repetitive tasks that don't need too much thinking, I guess. And so for us, that's largely about things very standardized terms of reference, or using it in terms of when we are doing reporting to record dialogues and get the transcript and kind of feed that through a Copilot process to spit out something that don't just sit there and for us already got lots of connectivity, use it best. Where I think it helps is taking that kind of level of resourcing or people's time out of really, and allowing us then to kind of have time to think what we need to think and input into documents then with that thinking and with that very specific lens that comes with knowing the work in the Pacific and knowing a specific context and knowing what kind of the program is doing and therefore needs to shape particular documents in that respect. That's what I would say on AI at this point in time.
Okay, I think that needs a whole session itself, Patrick. I think there's a really interesting discussion around that one. Okay, we might move on. There's lots more things that we could raise for you, but we really want to give you some questions to think about now. Can we just go to the next slide? We lost. There we go. Discussion points. So we wanted you to spend a bit of time talking either on your tables or to the people next to you about whatever you like, but these are some questions we'd suggest. Who should identify the effectiveness and value of programs like governance programs that are trying to work internally in country and regional systems? And when? At what point in a program life do you start to say, yes, this was worth doing? It was a good thing to fund. It was a good thing for Australia or whoever to be involved in. In your experience, what's the information and data that you really need? and to what purpose. So there's lots, like our speakers have talked about, lots and lots of data collected just in case, in my experience, and lots of information, lots of stories generated, lots of interesting meetings recorded and so on. Do we need all that data? What do we really, really need? And then I guess the question that would help me know whether I can retire like Patrick or might need to hang around, maybe we don't need traditional M&E in these sort of programs. Maybe it is a bit of a waste of space and a waste of time, given what we get out of it. Do we need instead more applied research or specific areas of inquiry undertaken by local people or people who are benefiting from this for themselves? So we'd be really interested in you spending a few minutes talking to the people next to you about whatever you'd like, I say, but maybe these questions, and then we might just go around the room at the end to get a few points. If people want to sit around a table, there's plenty of tables. Feel free to turn around and talk to people next to you. And people online, we'll come back to you with some answers in a few minutes. Vishnu and Lisa and Petrarca, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but we're just in discussion groups. If you can hang online and we'll come back in about 10 minutes, and because there may be questions for you as well. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, can we come back together for just a couple of minutes before lunch? We thought we'd just go around each table and give you a chance to tell us about one thing you were discussing. I think we've still got our co-speakers online, so they may have some comments as well to come back with. But we'll go around and just give each table a chance to tell us one thing they were talking about. We'll pass the microphone around so that everyone can hear. Okay, I was on this table and they were having a really interesting discussion about illustrations.
So at our table, we were talking about a lot of things and like different kinds of data and things like that, and we were trying to link it back to evaluation. And one thing that I think a few of us got excited about was the using mapping tools as a evaluation, as or a monitoring tool. And we were talking about you can map out like a political economy analysis of people's power and their influence in the system. But then we were also talking about mapping out like, I want to say like figuratively, or like concepts and how that evolves and brings people together as well. And then from that, you can list like, we may not have like a way to, the attribution problem is then about bringing these people together and building those networks and thus like being able to drive change around this area. So that's one thing that we talked about.
About this table over here.
By acclamation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think most of our discussion here focused around the idea of when you talk about the question was like, what is traditional Mel? And because it's evolved so much over the past 10 years. And at the same time, when we talk about, it's really a mixed approach of sort of the type of information that we need for short-term or medium-term decision-making, but also, communicating results. But we have different stakeholders. We have, DFAT on one hand, for example, but we also have our national government counterparts on the other hand. They have different objectives of what they want to see. And at the same time, but we also need that longer-term visioning and understanding of problems and what have you, and that's where that applied research comes in. But you were saying that, the idea of research seems, what was the word you used? A luxury. Research feels like a luxury in a donor program. So what should we be calling it instead, so that it's something that, because it's a very valuable process, but how to resourcing it in a way that's sort of accountable and what have you is another question.
Said chuck out M&E and then you've got resources. Okay, this group.
Okay, I've got 3 points to say. We had a really, really rich, interesting conversation. The first point was the reflection that we've been talking about, sort of not this exact issue, but around this issue for 40, 30, 20, 10 plus years. So this is a wicked problem. We talked about the issue we felt, a big issue was the projectisation of development and really thinking around governance and M&E and working in ways which work towards the moving away from a parallel system and actually working with data that actually feeds into the local governance system. So kind of weaning ourselves out and really making sure that the local governance system has the capacity to do its own data collection and data use. And then we had another interesting conversation around triple loop learning and feedback loops and ideas of triple loop learning. And then we also had a really interesting conversation, and we didn't quite sort of nail it, but this kind of tension between, should we be focusing on the process and how change happens through process, or should we be focusing on the outcomes and really recognising that at the end of the day, it's the outcomes that we're wanting to understand. And so, yeah, there was a bit of a tension there as well. Thanks.
Thank you. More questions than answers, I think. Okay, this group. I think you were nominated. Huh?
But basically, we first started our conversation with acknowledging the fact that value is, in a way, has this plurality quality, that many of our stakeholders tend to have different values, and therefore and some of them are actually not compatible with each other, such that it might actually conflict at some point. So in trying to identify who actually identifies, who should identify value, that's really a question of scoping in terms of the project. So whoever you identified as part of your stakeholders should be able to, talk about what kinds of values are important. The other aspects that we've discussed seem to be more about the realities of looking into MEL. So we have representatives here from the Australian government, and it seems that what's necessary here from a complex, from operating in complex environments is that, or complex systems, is that some of the things that we're implementing, again, will actually reveal feedback loops, will actually reveal trade-offs, etc. But the challenge is, how do we now take those into consideration into the mill that has been put in place in the beginning, for example. We now see that there's a room for being able to adapt the mill, for example, for DFAT or even for other government agencies. The question is not so much that they can't or they can actually. It's more of how to do it systematically, how to do it within the bounds of the mandates of these government agencies.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for being part of our discussion. I wonder if you could just join me, and because all the people online are still with us, if you could just join me in thanking them for this. And I think it's now lunchtime.